The rain had been falling since dawn, turning the sidewalks of Greenville Avenue into sleek ribbons of gray. The storefront awnings rattled under the wind, and puddles formed in the dips of the road, reflecting the towering glass buildings above. Maya pulled her frayed jacket tighter around her shoulders as she adjusted the weight of the old canvas backpack on her back. It wasn't heavy with belongings, she didn't have much left, but what it carried was everything: a change of clothes, a toothbrush, a dented thermos, and a sketchbook with pages soft from years of being thumbed through. Her sneakers squelched with each step. She'd been walking for nearly an hour, scanning the street for an opportunity, any opportunity, to make a little money before the shelter closed for the night. The women's shelter charged $5 for a bed, and they were strict about closing the doors at 8 sharp. Without that bed, she'd be sleeping under the 4th Street Bridge again. She stopped under the awning of a cafe to catch her breath, rubbing her hands together for warmth. That's when she saw it, a sleek black sedan parked at the curb, water beading across its spotless surface. Its owner, a tall man in a charcoal overcoat, stood beside it with a phone pressed to his ear. He didn't look like the type who worried about $5. In fact, he looked like the type who wouldn't even notice if 100 went missing from his wallet. His hair was neat, his shoes gleamed, and the cut of his coat screamed custom tailoring. Maya hesitated. She hated asking for help. She always offered work in return, even if it was small. People respected that more, at least sometimes. She took a breath, stepped forward, and tapped lightly on the driver's side window. The man looked up mid-sentence, his brow furrowing. He rolled the window down just enough to keep the rain out. Yes. His voice was deep, clipped, like someone who was used to being in control. Maya swallowed. Can I wash your car for $5? For a second, he just looked at her, phone still pressed to his ear. Then he turned slightly away from his car. $5. She nodded quickly. Yes, sir. I have my own rag and soap. It'll only take 10 minutes. His gaze traveled over her damp jacket, her worn shoes, the threadbare strap of her backpack. Why exactly 5? Because, she said, her voice steady though her heart was pounding, that's the cost of a bed at the shelter before it closes. I'll work for it, not just ask. The man's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer. Then he raised a finger, signaling her to wait, and turned back to finish his call. Maya shifted on her feet, glancing at the cafe behind her. A couple of customers were staring through the window at the odd scene outside, the rain-soaked girl, the luxury car, the man with a voice that carried authority. When he finally hung up, he leaned toward her again. All right, he said slowly. Let's see what you can do. Her chest loosened just a fraction. She pulled a small bottle of dish soap and a rag from her backpack. The rag had been washed so many times it was more gray than white, but it was clean. The rain made the work easier, rinsing away the suds as she scrubbed. She crouched to clean under the rims, then reached high to wipe down the roof. The cold beat at her fingers, but she kept moving. The man didn't hover, but he didn't leave either. He leaned against the wall of the cafe, watching her with unreadable eyes. Halfway through, a barista stepped outside to dump a bin of coffee grounds. She gave Maya a once-over and wrinkled her nose. You're blocking the view. Customers don't want to see, she trailed off, clearly meaning you. Before Maya could respond, the man's voice cut in. She's fine where she is. The barista blinked, glanced at him, then went back inside without another word. Maya walked faster, aware of his gaze. When she was done, she stepped back, breathing hard, and wrung out the rag. There, she said quietly. Thank you for letting me. He walked over, inspecting the car. You're thorough, he said. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a billfold. She held up her hands quickly. It's just $5, sir. I don't want charity. His mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile, more an expression of interest. "It's not charity if you earned it." He handed her a crisp $50 bill. Maya hesitated. 50 was 10 nights at the shelter. 50 meant a chance to buy clean socks, maybe even fix the broken zipper on her jacket. But something in her resisted. "This is too much." "You did more than you promised," he said simply. Her fingers curled around the bill. "Thank you." As she slid the rag back into her bag, she felt his eyes still on her. "What would you do," he asked suddenly, "if you had a regular job? Something steady?" She looked up, startled by the question. "Save for art classes," she admitted before she could stop herself. "I used to draw all the time." He nodded once, as if filing the information away. "Interesting." The rain had begun to slow, and the late afternoon light was shifting toward dusk. Maya stepped back toward the sidewalk, unsure if their conversation was over. "Wait," he said. "What's your name?" "Maya." "I'm Ethan." His tone was neutral, but something about the way he said it made her wonder if people usually reacted when they heard it. They stood there for a bit, the city noise and drizzle filling the space between them. Maya nodded politely. "Thank you again, Ethan." He didn't reply, but she caught the faintest ghost of a smile before he slid into his car. Sometimes, the smallest requests lead to the biggest changes. If you believe kindness can show up when you least expect it, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the stories that remind us of our shared humanity. As Ethan's car pulled away, Maya tucked the 50 into the hidden pocket of her backpack and turned toward the bus stop. She didn't know that this rainy afternoon, this $5 request, had just set her life on a course she could never have imagined. The bus jolted forward, and Maya gripped the edge of her seat, her backpack resting in her lap. Outside the fogged window, the city slid by in streaks of neon and wet concrete. She traced the pattern of raindrops running down the glass, feeling the tension in her chest begin to ease, just a little. $50. She still couldn't believe it. She'd asked for 5, prepared to bargain for 3 if she had to. But now the bill was folded neatly inside the inner pocket of her bag, tucked away like a secret. She reached up to adjust the strap of her jacket and caught a glimpse of herself in the bus's side mirror. Her hair was damp and tangled. Her cheeks, pale from too many skipped meals, had hollows where they hadn't before. The shelter was only a few stops away, but Maya didn't feel ready to face its peeling paint walls and crowded dormitory. The noise of the place, the coughs, the arguments, the restless tossing in narrow bunks, made sleep a shallow, fragile thing. Maya had learned early that life didn't slow down for anyone. Her parents had been gone since she was 19, a car accident on a winter road had taken them both. With no siblings, she'd worked 2 part-time jobs to keep their small apartment, juggling bills and barely making rent. She'd been a waitress at a diner on West 14th Street for almost 3 years. The place smelled of coffee and frying bacon, and the regulars knew her name. Then the landlord sold the building, the diner closed, and the help wanted signs she chased all read experience required. Within 3 months, she'd fallen behind on rent. The eviction notice had come in a plain envelope with no warning. She still remembered the day she'd stuffed her clothes and sketchbook into her backpack, locking the door of the apartment for the last time. It had been her mother's gift on her 15th birthday, a hardbound, cream-colored book with thick pages. At first, she'd filled it with quick doodles, street scenes, cups of coffee, people waiting at bus stops. Over the years, her hand had grown more confident, lines cleaner, shading more deliberate. In the shelter, when nights stretched long and restless, she'd draw under the dim light of the emergency exit sign. The sketches were her one thing untouched by hunger, cold, or pity. Tonight, as the bus rumbled on, she pulled the sketchbook from her bag and flipped to a page she'd walked on last week, a sleek black sports car, captured in motion. She'd drawn it from memory, after seeing it streak past her on the street one afternoon. The resemblance to Ethan's sedan struck her now, and she smiled faintly. Her days had become a routine of survival. Morning coffee from the soup kitchen. Odd jobs if she could find them, cleaning windows, carrying groceries, sweeping storefronts. Afternoons at the public library, staying warm and searching for work online. Evenings either at the shelter or, if it was full, curled up on cardboard under the bridge near Riverton Park. She kept to herself. Out here, trust could be dangerous currency. Still, every now and then, kindness surprised her, a shopkeeper slipping her a sandwich by accident, a fellow shelter guest lending her a blanket on a freezing night. Those moments stayed with her. The bus slowed, brakes hissing, and Maya rose. She stepped out into the damp evening, the smell of wet asphalt mingling with the faint aroma of fried food from a nearby diner. The shelter's peeling green door loomed ahead. She pushed it open, the familiar creak greeting her like an old, tired friend. Inside, the lobby buzzed with quiet conversation. A woman at the front desk, glasses perched on her nose, looked up. "Evening, Maya. You've got a bed tonight." Maya slid the $5 bill across the counter. "Yeah. I'm in early." "Lucky you." "We are filling up fast," the woman said, scribbling her name on the register sheet. For so many like Maya, each day is about finding enough to see the next sunrise. And sometimes, a chance meeting changes everything. If you believe every small act matters, hit subscribe so you can follow her journey, because it's about to take a turn she never saw coming. The dorm smelled faintly of damp clothes and cleaning fluid. Rows of metal-framed beds filled the space, most already claimed. Maya found hers near the corner, a thin mattress under a scratchy blanket. She stowed her backpack under the bed, keeping the sketchbook close. Around her, the room hummed with whispered conversations, the rustle of plastic bags, and the occasional cough. She lay back, staring at the ceiling, replaying the afternoon. The way Ethan had studied her, not with pity exactly, but with something else, curiosity. It was unusual. Most people either looked through her or avoided looking at all. What would you do if you had a regular job? The question had hung in the air long after he'd asked it. She'd answered without thinking, save for art classes, but now the words felt almost too vulnerable. Why had she told him that? Maybe because, for a brief moment, she'd felt seen. Not as a woman without a home, but as a person with something worth wanting. She sighed, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Somewhere down the hall, someone was laughing softly. The sound was oddly comforting. Outside, the rain finally stopped. The city light spilled in faintly through the dusty window, painting long, pale stripes across the floor. Maya didn't know that Ethan was sitting in his parked car that very moment, staring at the raindrops on his windshield, replaying the scene himself. And she certainly didn't know that this was not the last time their paths would cross, not by chance, and not for $5. The rain hadn't bothered Ethan. It rarely did. What unsettled him was the conversation replaying in his head. Because that's the cost of a bed at the shelter before it closes. It wasn't the words themselves, it was how she'd said them. Not as a plea. Not as an excuse. Just a plain fact, delivered with the kind of honesty that stripped away all pretense. Ethan Cole wasn't accustomed to plain facts. Not anymore. At 34, he was CEO of Cole Automotive, a name spoken with equal parts admiration and intimidation in the luxury car world. His designs had won awards in his 20s, sleek silhouettes and engineering innovations that had shifted industry standards. But the Ethan of those days felt like another man entirely. That man had sketched at cafe tables until closing, driven prototype models down coastal highways just to feel the wind tug at his sleeves, and laughed easily. That man had also been in love. 2 years ago, the accident had changed everything. He and his fiancée, Claire, had been on a late-night drive after dinner with friends. A patch of black ice on a curve near the river, the tires losing grip, the impossible seconds when he'd known they wouldn't make the turn, and then nothing but crushing metal and the taste of blood. Ethan survived with a mild concussion and a thin scar near his temple. Claire hadn't survived at all. After that, it stopped sketching. Stopped driving for pleasure. The business became his only focus, a fortress of numbers, deadlines, and quarterly reports. The tabloids had dubbed him the storm-faced CEO. It wasn't entirely inaccurate. That was why today had been so strange. The girl, Maya, she'd said, had spoken to him without the slightest flicker of recognition. No calculated charm, no attempt to impress. Just directness. Back at the office. Ethan stepped into his penthouse office, shaking the rain from his coat. The city skyline glowed in the floor-to-ceiling windows, light scattered like gold across black glass. He loosened his tie and set his laptop on the desk. His assistant, Lydia, had left the usual evening folder, tomorrow's meeting agendas, contract revisions, and a stack of messages from investors. He pushed them aside and pulled out a sheet of sketch paper. For the first time in months, his hand moved almost without thinking. A sleek coupe took shape under the pencil's tip, lines curving in harmony, the design balance between elegance and speed. It wasn't until he leaned back that he realized something. The curve of the hood, the slant of the headlights, it was reminiscent of the black sedan Maya had just washed in the rain. He stared at the sketch, an ache pulling at his chest. Designing used to feel like breathing. But after Claire's death, every car became a reminder of the one he couldn't control, the one he couldn't stop from skidding into oblivion. So he'd buried himself in boardrooms, watching the company grow but feeling less connected to it with each passing quarter. Sometimes it's not the big moments, but the smallest encounters, that bring us back to the parts of ourselves we thought were gone forever. If you're ready to see where this unexpected connection takes Ethan and Maya, make sure to subscribe. The next chapter changes everything. Ethan left the office later than usual. The rain had stopped, but the air was still cool and damp. He drove without turning on the radio, the city unfolding quietly beyond the windshield. At a red light, he caught himself thinking about her again. About the way she'd crouch low to clean the rims, completely focused, ignoring the stares of strangers. She had pride, but not the brittle kind. Hers seemed unshakable, even under the weight of circumstance. He wondered how long she'd been living like that. Back at his apartment, a sprawling, modern space overlooking the river, Ethan poured himself a glass of water and stood by the window. The thought came uninvited but refused to leave. He could help her. Not just with a one-time bill, but with something more permanent. He knew enough about pride to understand she wouldn't take charity. Which meant the offer would have to be work, real work. Something she could accept without feeling diminished. The garage at the Cole Automotive headquarters needed a new cleaning schedule. It was a legitimate job, and one she could handle. The next morning, Ethan asked Lydia to find Maya. The girl who was outside the cafe yesterday. Mid-20s, dark hair, worn jacket. Lydia raised an eyebrow but didn't question him. She was used to unusual requests. Do you know where she might be? She said she was going to the shelter on 8th, Ethan replied. By the end of the day, Lydia returned with a note. Her name's Maya Torres. She's been in and out of the 8th Street shelter for 6 months. No phone, no permanent address. Ethan folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. He wasn't entirely sure why he cared so much, only that he did. Somewhere in the city that night, Maya was tucking her sketchbook under her pillow, unaware that the man she'd met in the rain was about to step directly into her world again. The morning after Ethan's quiet decision, Maya stood in line at the soup kitchen, rubbing her hands together against the early chill. The sky was still a pale wash of grey, the air carrying the smell of rain-soaked asphalt. She was debating whether to go to the library or see if Mr. Patel at the corner store needed help unloading boxes when she felt someone step into the space beside her. Maya Torres. She turned to find a tall woman in a navy suit, hair pulled into a sleek bun, holding a clipboard. "Who's asking?" "My name's Lydia," the woman said. "I work for someone who'd like to offer you a job. It's temporary, part-time, but steady." "He saw you working yesterday." Maya's brows drew together. "You mean Ethan?" Lydia's lips quirked slightly, but she didn't answer directly. "He'd like you to clean the garage at the Cole Automotive headquarters. Twice a week to start. The pay is above standard for the work." Maya blinked. "Garage cleaning. Why me?" "Because you were thorough," Lydia said simply. "And because you asked for work, not charity." 2 hours later, Maya was standing in the underground garage of a building she'd only seen from a distance before. The concrete floor gleamed under bright lights. Rows of cars, some sleek and modern, others vintage and immaculate, stood like silent sentinels. Ethan was there, leaning against a pillar, dressed in a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled back. "You showed up," he said, his voice carrying an almost imperceptible note of approval. "I said I'd work for it," she replied, glancing around. "This is a lot of space to clean." He handed her a set of keys and pointed to a storage room stocked with cleaning supplies. "I'll give you 2 hours today. No rush, just do it right." Maya set to work, starting at one end of the garage. She swept carefully, making sure to get into corners. Then she mopped, using small, precise strokes. Ethan didn't hover, but she noticed him walking past occasionally, as if checking her progress without making it obvious. Halfway through, she took a short break and pulled her sketchbook from her backpack, flipping to a fresh page. One of the older model cars had caught her eye. Its curves reminded her of something she'd seen in a book about 1960s Italian designs. She began to draw, head bent, pencil moving quickly. When she looked up, Ethan was standing a few feet away. "That's a 67 Bellagio," he said. She smiled faintly. "I figured it was European, but the front grille's unusual." His gaze lingered on the sketch. "You have a good eye. Better than some of my junior designers." Maya shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "It's just a hobby. Sometimes the right people see what the rest of the world has overlooked. If you believe hidden talents deserve to be found, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens when Maya's drawings take her further than she ever imagined." By the time the 2 hours were up, the garage floor gleamed, and the storage room was tidied without being asked. Maya returned the keys to Ethan. "You don't waste time," he said. "I don't have the luxury," she replied without malice. He studied her for a moment, then pulled an envelope from his pocket. "First day's pay." She took it, weighing it in her hand before sliding it into her backpack. "Thanks." Before she could turn to leave, he added, "Same time next week. And bring that sketchbook." Her brows knit. "Why?" "Because I'm curious to see what else you see that the rest of us miss." As she left the building, Maya realized something unusual. She didn't feel like she'd been doing charity work for someone rich who wanted to feel generous. She'd done a job. A good job. And she'd been treated like she had value. It was a small thing. But for someone used to being invisible, it was enough to make her walk a little taller that day. What Maya didn't know was that Ethan had already spoken to his design director that morning, mentioning her sketches. And he had no intention of letting her talent stay hidden in the pages of that one book. The second time Maya walked into the Cole Automotive headquarters, she was more prepared. Her jacket was still worn, but she'd mended the frayed cuffs with neat stitches the night before. She'd even stopped by a thrift shop on the way in and found a clean white shirt for $2. The security guard at the front desk barely looked up as she passed, but the receptionist on the main floor, a woman in a fitted navy dress, gave her a once-over that made it clear she didn't belong. "Garage's down 2 levels," the receptionist said, her tone dripping with the kind of politeness meant to keep someone in their place. Maya just nodded, pressing the elevator button. She'd learned long ago that silence could be its own kind of armor. In the garage, Ethan was waiting, leaning against the same pillar as last time. He had a cup of coffee in one hand, and when he saw her, a small smile touched his face. "You brought a sketchbook." She patted her backpack. "Didn't think you were serious." "I'm always serious about design," he said, gesturing toward the same 67 Bologio she'd drawn last week. "I want to see what you do differently with it." As she got to work, a couple of employees walked by, both wearing branded Cole automotive jackets. They gave her curious looks, one even whispered something to the other, followed by a snicker. Maya ignored them, but she could feel the heat rising in her cheeks. After she finished mopping one section of the garage, Ethan waved her over to a workbench. Spread out were several photographs of car interiors, sleek dashboards, leather seats, modern control panels. "Tell me which one feels most human," he said. She frowned. "Most human. The one you'd want to sit in for hours. The one that feels like it was made for a person, not just for show." She studied the photos, finally tapping one with a simple, elegant dashboard. "This one. The lines aren't trying too hard. Everything's where it should be. It feels like comfort." Ethan looked at her for a long moment before nodding. "Exactly what I thought. Sometimes the best ideas don't come from boardrooms, they come from the people no one thinks to ask." If you believe every voice deserves to be heard, hit that subscribe button and keep watching Maya's world change. Later, when the garage work was done, Ethan invited her upstairs for coffee. Maya hesitated in the elevator, feeling out of place as the floors ticked upward. His office was nothing like she'd expected, less polished glass, more warm wooden shelves filled with car models. "Sit," he said, motioning to a chair by the window. He poured coffee into 2 mugs and handed her one. She set her sketchbook on the table and opened it to a fresh page. Her pencil moved quickly, reimagining the Bologio with subtle changes, softer angles, a more open front grille, a curve to the roofline that hinted at speed without losing elegance. Ethan leaned over her shoulder, studying the lines. "You know," he said slowly, "most of my designers would take weeks to do what you just did in 10 minutes. She glanced up at him. "I'm not a designer." "Not yet," he replied. That night, back at the shelter, Maya sat on her bed staring at the day's pay envelope. But it wasn't the money that made her chest feel tight, it was the strange sense that maybe, for the first time in a long while, someone was looking at her as more than a temporary problem to solve. She didn't know if that was good or dangerous. And upstairs in his penthouse, Ethan was looking at her sketch again, wondering why it mattered so much to him that she stay in his orbit. By Maya's 3rd week at Cole Automotive, whispers had become a steady undercurrent every time she walked through the underground garage. Some employees masked their curiosity with polite nods, others didn't bother hiding their disdain. She was the mystery cleaner, the one Ethan Cole, of all people, had brought in without explanation. That alone was enough to make her a target. On a Tuesday morning, she arrived to find the storage closet locked. Her key, the one Ethan had given her, wouldn't turn the bolt. "Problem." The voice came from behind her. A man in a spotless coverall leaned casually against the wall, smirking. He had the build of someone who'd been lifting tools his whole life, and the look of someone who enjoyed making other people squirm. "Just need to get my supplies," she said evenly. "Funny," he replied. "That's the same closet I use. And I don't remember you having clearance for it." Before she could respond, he dangled a keyring in the air, letting it jingle. "Guess you have to wait." "What's going on?" Ethan's voice cut through the air like a clean blade. The man straightened immediately, shoving the keys into his pocket. "Nothing, sir. Just making sure the new hire knows the rules." Ethan's gaze shifted to Maya. "The rule is you do your job without interference. Open the closet." The man hesitated, then unlocked the door. Maya stepped inside, collected the mop and bucket, and rolled them out without another word. As she filled the bucket at the utility sink, Ethan leaned against the doorway. Does that happen often? Not usually with a bucket of water involved, she said, trying to keep it light. But he didn't smile. If anyone gives you trouble, you come to me. I can handle it. I know you can, he replied. That's not the point. Sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about proving you're strong, it's about someone finally saying you shouldn't have to fight alone. If you're with Maya on this journey, hit subscribe so you don't miss the battles that will shape her future. Later that day, Maya was cleaning near the lift when she overheard two junior designers joking about her. She's probably here because she knows someone upstairs, one said. Knows him how? The other replied with a laugh that made Maya's stomach turn. She could have ignored it. She almost did. But instead, she stood, walked over, and said clearly, I'm here because I do my job well enough that your boss noticed. Maybe you should worry less about my broom and more about your deadlines. The silence that followed was almost satisfying. When Ethan passed through later, he noticed the quiet around her station. What happened? He asked. Maya shook her head. Nothing that needs your attention. But his eyes lingered on her a moment longer before he moved on. In truth, he admired it, the way she refused to play the victim even when it might have been easier. At the end of the shift, Maya returned her supplies to the closet and found a new key on the top shelf, tagged with her name. Under it was a note in Ethan's precise handwriting. For when you don't feel like asking permission. She folded the note carefully into her pocket. That night, she sat in the shelter's dim common room, sketchbook open, pencil moving in slow arcs. The day had been exhausting, but she realized she wasn't carrying the same weight she used to when people tried to cut her down. Maybe it was because, for the first time, someone with power wasn't just looking down at her, he was standing beside her. Maya arrived at the garage to find Ethan waiting for her, not by the cars this time, but beside a rolling cart stacked with glossy poster boards. Come with me, he said simply. She followed him up 2 floors to a glass-walled conference room. The air inside was cool, smelling faintly of leather and coffee. Around the long table sat 5 members of the Cole automotive design team, each with sleek laptops and skeptical eyes. Ethan placed the poster boards on the table one by one. Each was a hand-rendered concept of a redesigned 67 Bellagio, the soft roofline, open grille, and refined curve exactly as Maya had drawn them. These, Ethan said, are what I want to develop for our next heritage line. A woman in a tailored blazer raised an eyebrow. These aren't from any of our designers. They are from Maya, Ethan replied, motioning toward her. She's been working here for weeks now. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Someone at the far end muttered, the cleaner. Yes, Ethan said evenly, his gaze sweeping the table. The cleaner who happens to have a better design instinct than most people in this room. One designer cleared his throat. With respect, sir, heritage models require precise understanding of brand history and... Ethan cut him off. And that's why I'm pairing her with you for development. Consider it a collaboration. Maya shifted uncomfortably, unsure if she'd just been given an opportunity or dropped into a pit. Opportunities don't always come wrapped in applause. Sometimes they arrive in a room full of doubters, daring you to prove them wrong. If you're ready to see Maya take on her biggest challenge yet, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. After the meeting, Ethan walked her back to the garage. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. I did, he replied. Because you belong in those rooms, whether they know it yet or not. She searched his face for a hint of amusement or pity, but found neither. Only certainty. The next day, Maya sat in the design lab beside a man named Trevor, who had been assigned as her collaborator. He wasn't unfriendly, but his skepticism was clear. You really draw all this freehand, he asked, flipping through her sketchbook. Yes. No CAD software. No training. She shook her head. Just a pencil. He whistled softly. Well, let's see if the pencil can handle some feedback. It wasn't exactly a compliment, but it was a start. Ethan didn't hover in the lab, but Maya caught him walking past more than once. He'd glance in, eyes flicking to her workstation, and keep moving. Part of her wanted to prove herself for her own sake. Another part wanted to prove him right for taking the risk. That night, as she left the building, she felt something she hadn't in a long time, the slow, cautious unfurling of possibility. The Coal Automotive Heritage Gala was the kind of event Maya had only ever seen in glossy magazines in the waiting rooms of doctors' offices. It was held in the grand ballroom of the Astoria Plaza, chandeliers like frozen waterfalls, gold trim on the walls, and a red carpet leading to double doors tall enough to fit an SUV. Maya stood just inside the entrance, feeling the weight of the silk dress Lydia had convinced her to wear. It wasn't new, a loan from Lydia's sister, but it was smooth under her hands and fit her better than she expected. Her hair had been pinned back, a few soft strands framing her face. She kept touching the simple silver bracelet on her wrist, grounding herself. The Heritage Line prototypes were displayed on raised platforms around the room, each under soft white lighting. Ethan's voice carried across the crowd as he moved from group to group, greeting investors, shaking hands with journalists, and nodding to familiar faces. Maya stayed near the back, clutching a small notepad. She was here as an observer, not a participant. At least, that's what she thought. When she spotted it, her heart skipped, the redesigned 67 Bellagio, every curve exactly as she'd sketched. It gleamed in soft pearl white, the light catching along its roofline like a ribbon of water. She moved closer, tracing the air above the hood without touching. The chrome details were just as she'd drawn them. Trevor appeared beside her, holding 2 champagne flutes. Looks better in person, doesn't it? You did a great job, she said, still staring at the car. We did, he corrected. His smile was brief but genuine. And you're about to find out just how much everyone's going to notice. A hush fell over the room as Ethan stepped onto the small stage near the front. A large screen behind him flashed images of Coal Automotive's history, old factory photos, vintage ads, early sketches. He began speaking about legacy, innovation, and the balance between honoring history and embracing the future. His tone was steady, confident, but there was an edge of something else, pride. This is the moment where private effort meets public recognition. If you believe hard work deserves its day in the light, hit subscribe now, because Maya's quiet sketches are about to change her life forever. And now, Ethan said, I want to show you the first of our Heritage Line concepts, a design that embodies everything we stand for. The lights shifted toward the 67 Bellagio prototype. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the audience. This car, Ethan continued, was inspired by someone outside our design department. Someone whose perspective reminded me why I started this company in the first place. Maya froze. He looked toward the back of the room. Maya Torres, would you join me? Every head turned. The air seemed to thin around her. Trevor gave her a nudge, and somehow her feet carried her forward. When she reached the stage, Ethan offered his hand to help her up. Maya's sketches transformed the Bellagio into what you see tonight, he told the crowd. She saw what we couldn't. And that's why she's now part of our design team. A round of applause swelled. Cameras flashed. Maya stood blinking under the lights, unsure whether to smile, cry, or run. As the applause died down, Ethan leaned just close enough for her to hear. Told you you belonged in those rooms. She swallowed hard, unable to find words, but her hand tightened slightly in his before she let go. That night, as she left the gala, her reflection in the glass doors looked different. Taller somehow. More certain. She didn't know the whispers in that room had already started, and that not everyone was happy about the cleaner-turned designer's rise. The Monday after the gala felt different the moment Maya stepped into the design lab. Some people greeted her with cautious smiles, others avoided her entirely. But a few, their eyes sharp, their voices low, looked at her like she'd stolen something that belonged to them. Trevor leaned toward her as she sat at her workstation. Don't take it personally. Recognition changes how people act. She offered a faint smile, but inside, her stomach tightened. She'd worked hard for that design. She hadn't asked for the spotlight, Ethan had pulled her into it. By mid-morning, she reached for her sketchbook to reference an earlier design and froze. It wasn't there. She checked her bag twice, then her desk drawers. Nothing. Her hands went cold. That sketchbook was more than paper, it was her history, her proof, her only portfolio. She scanned the room, heart thudding. Most people were absorbed in their work. But near the back, a young designer named Melissa was leaning against the counter, flipping through a large folder that looked suspiciously familiar. Maya crossed the room. That's mine. Melissa looked up, eyebrows lifting in mock innocence. Oh. I just found it on the counter. Didn't know it was so precious. You knew, Maya said evenly, holding out her hand. Melissa didn't move. You walk in here with no degree, no resume, and suddenly you're the star of the gala. People are wondering what you really did to get here. The words were meant to sting. Maya kept her voice steady. What I did was work. And if you're so sure otherwise, you can hand me my sketchbook, and we'll let Ethan decide. That got a flicker of something, doubt, maybe, in Melissa's eyes. But before she could respond, a shadow fell across them. Jealousy can turn admiration into sabotage faster than you think. If you want to see how Maya handles the pressure, and whether Ethan steps in, hit subscribe now, because this is the turning point. What's going on? Ethan's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. Melissa's confidence wavered. Nothing, sir. Just looking at her sketches. Without permission? Ethan asked. Melissa opened her mouth, but Ethan's raised eyebrow silenced her. Hand it back. She reluctantly passed the sketchbook to Maya, who took it and tucked it into her bag. Ethan's gaze swept the room. If anyone here has a problem with how Maya got here, my office is open. But remember, I decide who belongs in this room. And she does. Back at her desk, Maya tried to focus on the new prototype interior layout, but her pulse was still pounding. She wasn't used to someone defending her like that, especially not in front of others. Trevor leaned over. You're making enemies, but you're also making believers. Keep showing them you deserve the seat you've got. She gave a small nod. I plan to. That evening, after most of the building had emptied, Maya stayed behind to finish a set of sketches. The quiet was soothing, just the hum of the air system and the faint click of her pencil. A soft knock sounded on the open door. Ethan stepped in, hands in his pockets. You didn't have to stay late, he said. Needed the space to think, she replied. And less noise. He studied her for a moment. Noise doesn't go away. You just get better at hearing the right voices. She tilted her head. And which ones are those? The ones that push you forward, he said. Not the ones that pull you down. They stood there for a moment in the quiet, something unspoken lingering in the air. Go home, Maya, he said finally, his voice softer. She packed up, sketchbook in her hands this time, and as she left, she had the faint, unnerving sense that whatever was building between them was about more than just cars. Spring arrived early that year. The air was warm enough to coax cherry blossoms from the trees lining the plaza outside Cole Automotive headquarters. Petals floated across the polished glass doors like confetti, drifting onto the shoulders of the people streaming inside. Inside the grand atrium, a crowd had gathered. It wasn't the usual corporate meeting. The press was here, cameras poised, and employees stood in clusters, murmuring in anticipation. Maya stood near the edge of the crowd, her sketchbook tucked under her arm. She hadn't been told why she needed to be here, only that Ethan wanted her in attendance. When he stepped onto the raised platform at the center of the room, the murmur stilled. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, and the kind of quiet authority that came from knowing exactly what you were about to do. "Thank you for being here," Ethan began, his voice carrying easily. For the past several years, Cole Automotive has built its reputation on innovation, design, and precision. But innovation doesn't always come from where you expect it. Sometimes, it walks in from the rain, carrying nothing but a warm backpack and a request to wash your car for $5. Maya's heart thudded. "I want to introduce someone who reminded me why I fell in love with this work in the first place," Ethan continued. Her vision transformed one of our most iconic heritage models, and her designs will help shape our next generation of vehicles. Please welcome our newest junior designer, Maya Torres. The crowd parted as he gestured toward her. Her steps felt slow and heavy as she made her way to the platform. She could feel the eyes, some warm, some cold, following her every move. When she reached him, Ethan offered his hand. She took it, and he gave a small squeeze before turning back to the crowd. "And one more thing," Ethan said, glancing at her. "Maya's first solo concept will debut at the International Auto Expo next month. It will carry her name alongside mine." Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras clicked furiously. Maya blinked at him, stunned. "Ethan, You earned it," he said quietly, just for her. "Every line, every curve, every late night. You earned all of it." From a rainy sidewalk to an international stage, Maya's journey proves it's not where you start, it's who sees your worth along the way. If you believe in stories where the underdog rises, hit subscribe now so you never miss the next one. When the event wrapped, employees approached to shake her hand. Some looked genuinely impressed, others carried that guarded politeness of people still making up their minds. Trevor found her in the crowd and grinned. "Looks like you're officially one of us. And for the record, I'm glad it's your name on that design." "Thanks," she said, and meant it. Melissa walked past without a word, but Maya didn't care. The validation she'd once thought she needed from everyone no longer mattered. Later, in the quiet of his office, Ethan poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to her. The sunlight poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, making the city beyond look almost gentle. "When you first asked to wash my car," he said, leaning against the desk, "I thought you'd take the $5 and disappear. I didn't expect you to change the way I see things." She smiled faintly. "I didn't expect you to be the CEO. Fair trade, then," he said with a low chuckle. They sipped their coffee in companionable silence for a moment. Then she set her cup down and pulled something from her bag, a framed sketch. It was the black sedan she'd washed that day in the rain, drawn in precise, elegant lines. At the bottom, in her neat handwriting, were the words, $5 was enough. Ethan took the frame carefully, his thumb brushing over the glass. "I'm hanging this right here," he said, pointing to the spot above his desk. "You don't have to." "Yes," he interrupted softly. "I do." As she left the building that afternoon, sketchbook under her arm and a head full of ideas for the expo, Maya felt lighter than she had in years. Not because her life was suddenly perfect, but because she finally had a place to stand, and people who wanted her there. For the first time since her parents died, the future felt less like a cliff's edge and more like an open road. And it had all started with a question in the rain, a rag, and the courage to ask for $5. From the smallest request can come the biggest changes. If Maya's story inspired you, subscribe now for more stories where hope finds its way in and turns everything around.